Just have a look at this fantastic castle cake. It would be perfect for any fairy tale lover. And the great thing about it is it's really simple. I've used shop bought meringues to create my turrets, and I've only used heart cutters across the whole of this cake, making the design really simple and easy to follow. My name is Abby, and let's get started. We're going to start by covering our cakes. Now, as you can see, I've already got my cakes made here, 2 of which are already covered. The cakes we're going to be using today are a 4-inch, a 7-inch and a 10-inch cake, because that will give you a nice deep step where we're going to put our towers for our castle later. I've got my icing already rolled out, and this is for my 10-inch cake here. So I've got that all nicely rolled out and smoothed out. Make sure you give your sugar paste a really good knead before you start to use it. I've also covered my cake in buttercream, so it's been chilled in the fridge and it's been covered in buttercream. And you can also see that there is a little drum board underneath it. That was just to give it a bit more height, and it gives it a nice sturdy base. So I'm going to take my icing and I'm going to put it over my rolling pin like this. And I'm going to bring my cake in. I'm going to lay my sugar paste over the top. So I've rolled my sugar paste out just so that it's ever so slightly larger than my cake. And then what you can do is just start to smooth it with your hands, pulling the pleats out, and work that icing around your cake. Okay, so once you've got your sugar paste round your cake, I'm going to smooth it now using a smoother. So I'm just going to rub on the top, just to even out any lines, and then round the sides as well. And I'm going to start to push down. I've got a straight edge smoother here, which I'm just going to use to start to push down on the sugar paste at the side. So you get a nice crisp line round the bottom. Now I levelled my cake off, and I used a cake leveller to cut it into layers so that you've got a nice straight top. You want this as level as you can because we are going to be stacking cakes on top of it. Okay, so as you can see, I've just started to push down the sugar paste with my smoother, and I'm just going to use a palette knife to cut away the excess so we get a nice clean edge. I've got about 1 kilo of sugar paste here. Overall, you'll need about 2.5 kilos for this whole cake. Now that my cake is nice and covered, I'm going to pop it onto my board. You can leave your cake to dry for a few hours so that sugar paste firms up before you put it onto your board. But I'm going to show you how to do that now. So I'm just going to move my cake out of the way. And I'm going to bring my board in. As you can see, my board is already covered in paste. I just used a pale green for this, and I've already added my ribbon. So that has been left to dry so it's nice and solid. Get some royal icing here. This is ready-made. You can make your own if you wish. And I'm just going to pop some of this in the centre of my board where we're going to put our cake. That's just to stick it to the board so that it doesn't move or shift around. I'm going to take my cake, and I'm just going to bring my board in a bit more. And that can go straight on there like that. Okay, lovely. Now once that's on the board, you're going to need to leave that to dry, and then we will dowel and stack our cakes. So I'm going to show you how to dowel the cakes now. My 7-inch cake I have already doweled, and I've used 3 dowels for that. and I'm going to show you how to do it on the 10-inch, which is exactly the same. I'm just going to use slightly more dowels. I am using some PME hollow pillars. These are brilliant for cake doweling because they're nice and sturdy, but they're easy to cut. So I've drawn myself a little template here, really simple. I've just drawn around a 6-inch card, which is an inch smaller than my cake is, so that I know that when I put my dowels in, they're going to be underneath the cake that's going on top of it, because you don't want them outside. It's really simple, and then I've just marked out the centre. I folded my piece of paper in half that matches my cake, and I've marked the centre, and then I've marked roughly where I'm going to put my dowels in. So I'm going to bring this in a bit. So I've laid my cake on top, and I'm just going to use a ball tool. Anything that's got a bit of a point on it will work. It's just to mark out those little points where we're going to put our dowels into our cake. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the little marks. I can just see them on the top of my cake there. Make them a bit more obvious for you. So I'm going to show you how to do this. So we're going to insert the first one into the centre of our cake, straight down through the middle. I'm going to push it as far as it will go, and I'm going to mark it with an edible pen, just so that it sits nice and flush with the surface of our cake, like so. Then I'm going to pull my cake dowel out, and I'm going to snip it right on that line. Lovely. And then I'm going to make the others match the same height as my dowel that I've just put in the centre. So I'm going to do 4 more of these. So you should have 4 dowels that are exactly the same height, or 5 in total, sorry. This means that when you put your next cake on top, it will be nice and level. Okay. Now that I've got all my dowels, I can pop them into my cake. So I'm going to put that one back in the centre. And then one on each of those points. And they push down nice and easy. Like so. So that when we put our next cake on, it's going to have a nice sturdy base to sit on. I'm going to put some royal icing on my cake now. Again, I'm using ready-made stuff. You can make your own if you wish. And I'm just going to pop some of that in the centre, nice and smooth, so that we can attach that cake. Okay, so I'm going to bring my 7-inch cake in now, which has already been doweled, and don't forget it's got a board underneath it the same size as a cake, so it's going to support the cake on top of those pillars. So I'm just going to bring that in, and I'm going to pop that one on top and in the centre. Lovely. I'm going to use my cake smoother just to push down so that's nice and flat. Okay, so once you're all happy with that, I would normally leave this to dry so that your royal icing has time to set, because if you then put your next cake on top, it does sometimes shift a little. I am going to show you how to do it straight away though, obviously because we're filming. So I'm going to bring my other cake in now. So this is my little 4-inch cake. Lovely. And I'm going to pop some royal icing on top, exactly the same as we did for the one before. Pop a little bit of icing on there. And pop that one on the top. Lovely. So now that my cake is all stacked, we can move on to making the towers for our cake. Right, so I'm going to show you how to make the turrets for your cake now. I've kept these really simple, so I am just making them out of icing. I have added something to my icing though, which is called Sugarcell or CMC, and that will just firm your paste up so that it sets harder. But these are really simple. I'm just going to roll them and cut them. So I've got some sugar paste here, which I've already added my CMC to, and I'm going to roll this out into a sausage. Now you want these to just sit above the top of your cakes. So I'm going to use one that I've already cut. So I cut the first one, and then I sort of stand it next to my cake, see how it looks, work out whether I need to cut a bit more off. And then once you've got one, you can use that as a guide for the rest of them, a bit like we did for our dowels earlier. So I've got my nice sausage of paste here. And I'm just going to use a palette knife cut the ends off nice and straight. Okay, now you're going to need quite a few of these. You're going to need 4 for the bottom tier, 3 for the next tier up, 2 for the sides of the top tier, and then we're going to put a regular height one on the top, and we're also going to put a shorter one on. So as you can see, I've just cut one here that's a bit shorter than the rest. Okay, so once you've cut those, you're going to need to leave those to dry a good few hours overnight if you can, so that they are nice and firm, so when they stand up they're not going to fall over. So that's how to make your turrets. I'm going to show you with the tops of the turrets now. I'm using these little edible meringues. I'm going to bring one of those in, and I've sprayed them with a luster spray, which I'm using pink today, and this is going to give it a really nice shimmer. So just for that, all I do, make sure you've got a nice space around you, is just spray them like so. That smells nice and sweet, that one. Okay, so I'm going to add some of our turrets to our tower now. Obviously these are all nice and dry, don't forget. So let's have a look. I'm going to bring 4 in for my bottom tier. And to do this, you're just going to attach them with a little bit of royal icing. So I'm going to put a little bit on the bottom of my turret. You only want a little bit, otherwise it'll all squeeze out the sides. And then a bit on the back. As you can see, when you leave them to dry on a flat foam pad, they do get a slightly flat back to them, which is brilliant for sticking them to the sides of your cake. So I'm going to find the front of my cake, make sure I find the right front. Lovely. And I'm going to position 4 of these around the base of my cake. Lovely. Make sure that they're sort of equidistant apart. Lovely. And then I'm going to do the same on the next 2 tiers, and I'm going to pop one in between where I've put the ones on the bottom tier. So I'd have one here, and one here, and then I'd have one either side on the top, and my final 2 right on the top with my short one. So I'm going to do that now. Before I go any further, I am just going to show you how to attach these to the tops. Again, just another little bit of royal icing on the bottom of your meringue, and they will sit nicely on top of your little turrets that you've made. And I would put one of those on each of my turrets. Okay, last one. Perfect. Now that our castle structure is complete, we can start to move on to adding the details such as the doors and windows. I'm going to start making some of the bits and pieces for our castle now. As you can see down here, I've got a lot of it ready made. I am going to go through and show you individually how to do each piece, but the idea is that it's really simple. They're all made using a set of 3 heart cutters. So let's get going. So I'm going to start by showing you how to cut these little hearts out that we're going to use for the pathway here. Okay, so I'm going to use some white paste here. You can use sugar paste or modelling paste for this. You don't need modelling paste, but if you've got it to hand, that's absolutely fine. So I'm going to use some corn flour to dust my surface with. I'm going to roll this out. Okay, so these are my heart cutters here. I've got 3 of them. The sizes aren't really important. As long as you've got them in sort of 3 different sizes, one smaller than the other, it doesn't really matter the overall size. So I'm going to use the 2 slightly smaller ones for this. So we're going to have some larger ones like this. And then some little ones. You'll probably need more of the little ones because they will fill in the gaps, because we're going to pop those down to look like the pebbles in our pathway. Okay, so I'm going to cut those out and I'm going to move them to one side to dry. So I'm going to move on now to show you how to make these lovely little leaves here. Okay, so I'm going to use some green sugar paste for this. And I'm going to roll it out. And I'm going to use the small cutter here. I'm just going to cut a few of those out to show you. Okay, and we're going to pick them up and I'm going to pinch them on the rounded ends, like so. So pinch those ends together, like that. It just gives you that lovely little leaf shape, and they're really simple and easy. Okay, and we're going to pop those to one side to dry. Next up, I'll show you how to make these little hearts here that just add a really pretty decoration to the top of your castle. I'm using a pink sugar paste this time, and it's a slightly darker pink than the pink we used to cover our cake with. So I'm going to roll that out. And I'm going to sprinkle it with some of this edible glitter here. I've got this in a cerise colour. Okay. And I'm going to use my rolling pin just to roll that into the sugar paste so that it doesn't all fall off. And I'm going to bring in my large heart cutter this time. Cut out large hearts, like so. And then I'm going to take my medium size cutter. I'm going to spin these round so that they're facing away from me, so the point is at the top. And I'm going to take my medium cutter and I'm just going to push it down into that heart, not all the way through, just enough so that it leaves the mark there, which adds a nice little detail. And then I'm going to pop these to one side. They do need to dry off slightly before you put them on your cake. They don't need to be rock solid, but just firm enough so they'll hold their shape, but soft enough so that you can bend them to the shape of the castle. Okay, so I'm moving on now to the windows, and I've got a couple of different designs here, so I'm going to show you how to do those. So I've got some brown sugar paste here now. I'm going to give that a good knead. And I'm going to roll this out. And I'm going to sprinkle it with some of that pink glitter again. And roll it in. Oh. Lovely. So for the larger windows, I'm going to use the large heart cutter here to cut those out. And I'm going to take a palette knife and I'm going to mark down the centre where the curves meet and the point is. And then I'm going to mark 2 lines on either side of that. Lovely. And I'm going to cut the centre out with the smallest heart cutter. I'm using a paintbrush to do this because it just doesn't leave any marks on the paste. You can push it out of the cutter without damaging it. So as you can see here, I've got 2 hearts now. I'm going to fill the centre of this one with a white piece. I'm going to use one of these that I used here earlier. But again, you just cut out a small white heart and fill the centre like so. And I'm going to hang on to these ones as they are, and what we'll do is we'll pop a little druggy on either side of the door to look like little shutters on the castle. So I'm going to move those over. I have got some that are in a slightly smaller size, so that's using the medium cutter. Again, marking it down the centre and either side. And then I use the small cutter. Now you have to be a bit careful with this one because obviously you're going to end up with a very thin piece of paste left. So do take your time. Lovely. And again, you can fill the centre with a white heart there. That's it. Lovely. And pop those to one side to dry. And now for these little shuttered windows on the turrets. Right, so I've got my piece of brown sugar paste in front of me still here. So I'm going to cut a heart out using my medium cutter. Push that out. And I'm going to mark it with the smallest heart cutter, a bit like we did for the pink hearts a moment ago. Just push that down on the centre to make a mark. And then we're going to mark the lines down the centre and to either side. And when we pop those onto the cake, we'll pop a little druggy either side of that centre line to look like little door handles. Now that we have all of our pieces made for our cake, I can start adding them on to really bring this cake to life. Right, so I'm going to start by making the door because that needs to go straight onto the cake. So I've got some brown sugar paste here, which I'm going to roll out. Okay, and I'm going to sprinkle it with some of that glitter, like we did for the windows. Lovely. Just roll that in again. I'm using a different heart cutter now. This one is a large heart cookie cutter. Any make or brand will do. You just want a heart-shaped cutter. So I'm going to cut that out. And like we did for the windows, I'm going to mark the lines. So we're going to go down the centre, and then you probably want about 3 lines either side of that door. Lovely. Now this is going to sit on the cake so that the rounded side is at the bottom. So I've got my small cutter here, and I'm going to cut 2 hearts out of it, either side of that centre line. One there. And one there. So the rounded edge of the heart faces the centre of the door. Hang on to those 2. I'm going to pop this on the cake now. So find the centre of your cake. Nice bit of glue on there, edible glue. And I'm going to take that door and I'm going to put it just onto the front of my cake. Okay, press it on. Lovely. I've got here 2 small hearts that I've cut out of white, and they were with the small cutter, and they are going to sit inside those little gaps that we've just made. Like so. Lovely. And I'm going to take the hearts that we've just cut out and attach those to the cake just on that door. Where the little white heart has the point, glue that, and then they should sit just there. And they're going to make like the handles on our door. Lovely. And to finish that off, I've got some silver dragées here. I've got a bag here that I've got mixed sizes. So there's 3 different sizes in here. So I'm going to use the large ones for this. So a little dot of glue in the middle of those little hearts that we've just popped on there. Let's have 2 of those. 1 on either side. Lovely. So that's your door done. So now we can start to add the windows. So I'm going to bring in this palette here that's got all of our little windows on it. I'm going to start by doing the ones on my turrets. So for that we're going to need these ones here that haven't got the cutout in them. And I'm going to put the glue on my turrets. I'm going to put 2 on each. And they sit the right way up. Press them onto that. Lovely. Brilliant. And I'm going to use some of the tiny little dragées to finish those off. So to do that, I've got a little bit of glue on the end of my paintbrush that's left over from what I've just used on here. So I'm going to pick that dragée up with the end of my brush. Just pop it, hopefully, onto the window. There we go. 1, 2. So they start to look a little bit like door handles. Okay, so I'm going to go round now and do all of those. Okay, so last one now. That's just going to go on the top here. Okay, now we can move on to our open windows. So they're going to go, I'm going to put a pattern in the centre of the 2 top tiers. So I'm going to do one of the large ones there. And then we're going to have 2 slightly smaller ones either side of that on a diagonal. Lovely, like so. And then above it, I'm going to have another large one and 2 little ones this time. So 1 large one in the centre. And then some of these little ones that we kept to one side from the cutouts, either side of that. And I'm just going to pop a couple of tiny dragées on these, a bit like we did for the shutters on the turrets. One there. And one there. Okay, and I'm just going to work my way round now, placing the rest of these windows evenly spaced around my cake. As you can see, my cake is really starting to come together now that I've added all those windows and doors. So I'm going to move on now to popping my pink ones on. And they're going to run around the top edge of my cakes. So I'm going to put a little line of glue around the edge here. And I'm just going to attach those so that the tops of the point of the heart poke up above my cake. Okay. If you get any pieces like this where you haven't quite got enough room to fit a whole heart, just cut one in half. Tuck it behind that turret. There. I'm going to add some of the large dragées to these, just in the little point where those two curves meet. So again, the large silver ones. And I'm just going to press them in. Like so. And I'm going to do this round all three edges, top edges of my cakes. Right, I think I've managed to get all my pink ones on there. Lovely. Okay, I'm going to move on to my leaves now. So these have all been drying nicely. They are still slightly soft. And I'm just going to pop these. I'm going to pop some around the door and in sort of the little corners where the turret meets the cake, and just along the edges of the base of our cake. So just a little bit of edible glue, and then we can just press those on. Like so. Lovely. So obviously I'm going to do this across the whole of my cake, but I'm just going to quickly show you the flowers. I'm going to be using these ready-made icing flowers here. Any variety of icing flower is absolutely fine, just something that's small that you can pop on with those leaves. If you can't get hold of any of those, I'm just going to show you how to make your own using a little blossom plunger here. So I've got some white paste. I'd roll that out. And you just punch these out. Let's bring that in. Like so. Okay, show you a few more of those. Lovely. And I just leave those to one side to dry, and then once they're dry you can pop them in the centres of your leaves. So I'm going to go around now and I'm going to finish putting the leaves and the flowers onto my cake. Okay, I think I'm happy with the placement of my flowers now. Lovely. So I'm going to move on and I'm going to do the little pathway now. So let's bring these in. So I'm going to use the white hearts that we cut out earlier. First thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to put a strip of glue on my cake that runs in front of my door. So I'm going to do 2 lines and I'm going to fill that gap in. So we're just putting glue on the front there. Make sure you haven't got any patches that you're going to miss, because otherwise the glitter we put on it in a minute will not stick. So make sure that's got a nice amount on it. Lovely. And it's kind of a bit like a jigsaw now. You have to kind of put your pieces on and fill up the gaps to look a little bit like crazy paving. So just see what fits where. Lovely. Right. And with the edible glitter that we had earlier, I'm going to sprinkle this over the top of these hearts now to fill up those little gaps in between. Lovely. And then I'm going to take a dusting brush and I'm just going to brush across the top of those to remove all the loose glitter. And what's left behind is this nice sort of little, give it a good brush. Pathway. Lovely. Now we're so close to finishing this amazing castle. I'm just going to talk to you about the ribbon quickly. I've got 2 ribbons on my cake board here, one in a pale green and then I've overlapped it with a second ribbon that's got a pattern to it. I've just attached that using some double-sided sticky tape. So I put the green one on and then I layered the second one over the top. I covered my board with a pale green sugar paste. If you don't want to cover your board, you can buy ready coloured drums. That's absolutely fine. I'm just going to show you how to add some candles to your board now. And I've got these lovely little roses here, which I've made using this Squire's rose mould. So for this, you just need some pieces of sugar paste. I've got the pale pink that we used for the cake earlier. I'm going to dust my mould with corn flour and push that into my mould. I am leaving it poking up over the top just a little bit so that it gives us enough depth to put the candles in a moment. And that just pops out like that. Lovely. And I would glue these to my board. I'm going to pop 2 round here. Place those on. And then pop a candle in the centre of each one, like so. And that's a really lovely little finishing touch for your cake. Of course, if you don't have a rose mould, you can use any other flower mould you have, or you can simply roll little balls of paste and you could pop your candle into one of those, like that. So let's just finish that off. Wonderful. Now I've got something here that's going to add a really lovely touch of glamour to our cake. This is an edible luster dust in a pump bottle. So you just spritz this onto your cake. This gets everywhere. Lovely. And that gives it a really pretty shimmer. Now, the only thing left is that we need some princesses for our castle. So I've got here 2 models, which I'm just going to pop on either side of my door, like so. Now that is a castle fit for a princess or prince.